no apologies for absence that we need to note, other than the Chief Executive, Stephen Vickers, who's on leave today, and Mandy Owen, who's away today as well. So can we move on to item 3 then, which is declarations of interest? Delith, anything to raise here?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, with regard to agenda item 8, which is the Torfaen Canal strategy, I think I've given advice to members that if you have any association with the key stakeholders referred to in paragraph 4.1 of the report, which would include the community councils, the Canal and River Trust, the Monmouthshire Abergavenny Brecon Canals Trust, the Canal Group Angling and the Torfaen Museum Trust, then my advice is that you have a personal interest to declare. I have been informed that Councillor C. Morgan is a member of Cwmbran Community Council, so if I could ask Councillor Morgan to confirm that.
Yes, I can confirm.
Thank you. Before I move on, Councillor Jones, yes.
I've also got the same interest, as I'm a member of Cwmbran Community Council, so I have a personal interest.
And I've also volunteered in the past for the Bridge 4065 Locks group, although I'm not a committee member or anything like that. So that.
Thank you.
Sorry, Delith. Yes, I volunteered for the same group.
Okay, thank you. With regard to agenda item number 9, which relates to the award of contract under the SRS procedural rules, Councillor Clark has a personal interest as he has been appointed by the Council to the SRS board and also acts as chair. So if I could ask Councillor Richard Clark to confirm that interest.
Happy to confirm that. Thank you, Delith.
Thank you, members. I'm not aware of any other interests that are being declared today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anything comes up during the meeting, then just raise it and I'll refer you back to Delith. Okay. Item 4 then is the confirmation of the Cabinet minutes from the 10th of October. Is everyone happy to agree those as an accurate record? Yep. Nothing to raise from those. Thank you. Update on actions. Anything we need to be aware of there, Nigel?
No, Leader.
Great, thank you, which means we can move straight to item 6, which is the Council Tax Base Report for 2024-25, and if I hand over initially to Sue Morgan.
Thank you, Leader. I'm not going to say a great deal about this report. It's pretty self-explanatory, and Nigel will comment a little, I think, on the detail. I just would draw members' attention to the opportunity that we're taking to do some more work in clarifying the position with regard to long-term empties and to explore whether there is any potential for council tax-related levers to be used to bring more properties back into use. And that work's progressing well, and I'm very grateful to staff for taking it forward, but we will get more on that in due course. So perhaps I can hand to Nigel to just outline the implications of the report.
Thank you, Executive Member. I mean, this is a standard report that comes every year. I'm sure members recognise it. So I won't go into it in any great detail. Basically, our Band D tax base, which we need to set for in readiness for setting the council tax, has gone up by 210 properties. We're continuing to apply the same discounts as from the previous year, and we're keeping the same collection rate. Other than that, the report is, as you would expect, it takes members through the calculation. It shows you the community council bandings, and as the executive member has said, it does make some commentary on the work we're doing around long-term empty properties. And as the executive member says, we will bring something back on that in the new year, in the run-up to setting the budget. Other than that, Leader, I'm just happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Nigel and Sue. Any questions, members? No, in that case, if I move to the recommendations, which are at paragraph 7.1, it's recommended that the tax base for 24-25 as detailed in the report be approved, and that for properties in prescribed classes A and B, i.e. second homes, the council continues to apply nil discount. For properties in prescribed class C, i.e. empty properties, the council continues to apply nil discount. A further report on premiums will be brought forward at the appropriate time, and that formal statutory financial information will be issued with the council tax demand notices. Is everyone happy to approve the report? That's approved unanimously. Thank you, colleagues. Which moves us then to agenda item 7, which is the Financial Monitoring 23-24 and the Revenue Budget 24-25 report. And back to Sue for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Well, we're all aware of the huge challenges that councils across the UK are facing. So we're bringing this budget estimates report today in the context of an unprecedented combination of national and international events. War in Europe and the Middle East, cost of living crisis that follows years of underfunding of public services, and rampant, if not as rampant, inflation that we are now considering these estimates for the next year. It's important to say that Welsh local authorities have been relatively protected, and we continue to appreciate the support of Welsh Government for local government services. But councils across the UK find themselves facing horrible choices, and some are having to consider really damaging cuts to their essential services. The Welsh Government itself is dealing with an in-year challenge in balancing its own books, and the impacts of inflation and rising demand on services over a number of years are taking their toll. It's important to stress it isn't just inflation, it is rising demand. Those levels of need for our services are continuing to increase. The good news, if there is good news, is that in contrast to many local authorities, Torfaen's in-year position is less worrying. Our 23-24 six-month forecast continues to indicate a favourable in-year position, and that's thanks to the strong financial discipline that this authority still is very well known for, and the expert guidance and support of our corporate finance leads. And I really want to put on record my thanks to all for that continued prudence and financial discipline and that very sensitive and effective leadership that the finance team deliver. So because of that, our in-year position is going to provide us with a small but helpful buffer to the pressures that are building for the next and future years. But we should not be in any doubt that those pressures will be considerable. Built in already is a good, healthy degree of savings that will be achieved in readiness for 24-25 by our corporate efficiency programme. And we're going to need to keep milking that programme and keep relying on that programme as we go forward. Important to note that the estimates we're looking at today are based upon a steady state. They don't reflect any new expansions of services, but they do include provision to fund the pay assumption, including for Torfaen schools, which is a really solid assumption and basis to be going forward on. But despite our best efforts, based upon what we expect to get for funding for 24-25, we still face a projected funding gap, which we will need to meet through both savings and increasing revenue. We've been able to hold our council tax increases to the lowest in Wales for a number of years, but we cannot do it indefinitely. So this report is modelled on revenue-raising assumptions that would increase council tax by 4.95%. And at that level, we could narrow, though not entirely close, the gap at this stage. But I just want to say that if we're to continue to offer the continuity and excellence of the services that our most vulnerable residents desperately need, we have to make sure we have the resources to do the job, and we have to make sure they are available in the future. I'm reassured by the detailed and thorough work of our staff across the organisation. My thanks to Nigel, our Assistant Chief Executive, Dave Lilly and his team for their excellent work. And because of that confidence, I'm able to state with some assurance that this report is based on a prudent and balanced response to the challenges that we face, and recommend it to you. Thank you. So, Nigel.
Thank you, Executive Member. I'll just canter members through the report. So the first part of substance is the current monitoring position for 23-24. And as the Executive Member has indicated, we are reporting a favourable variance of over £1 million at month 6. The reasons there are set out in the report, and they're pretty consistent with the reasons that were articulated when we brought the last monitoring position in September. It does help with our overall financial standing that the in-year position is reasonably positive. and it shouldn't go unsaid that decisions that the council took to fully fund or to try to fully fund pay as part of the 23-24 budget are bearing fruit then in this monitor. And as the pay awards have been agreed, so we've been able to pass that money through and not destabilise services. In 4.3, we talk about the mitigations, and we've all but achieved the mitigations that the current budget set out to agree. There's a section there on financial standing which shows our reserves position and what has been spent out of the general fund as it's currently. Then we've got a section on the capital programme. Before we then start talking about the estimates position for the current year. In 5.2, I bring out the key assumptions that we've made so far in terms of the budget. Employee-related costs. I mean, every year it's difficult to judge what that should be. And what we've done is we've built the estimates based on a 3% pay award across all staff groups, but we've also built in an additional contingency which would be equivalent to a further 1% pay award. That's simply because the outlook is uncertain going forward. And as I've indicated, our ability to fund pay in previous years is something that has helped our overall position. In terms of the other assumptions, they're there. Members, can read them. Two other key points to bring out. The executive members referred to the fact that the estimates are based on a steady state, so we built in no service growth. And we've assumed the level of grants will continue into 24-25 that we received in 23-24. And in Appendix 3, you will see that we've got something just over 75 million in assumed grants funding our estimates. So that's the assumptions. You've then got a table at 5.3 which shows the current gap of all services at 4.2 million. There's then some commentary in 5.4 where we talk about schools principally and an early decision from the executive that you were minded to fund the pay in schools, and we've passported that through into their schools budget, which would give the schools budget an increase of around 4%, which is slightly better than the rest of the services. That has then left the schools with a gap of around 1.4 million. We've discussed that approach with head teachers. We discussed it at quite an early point in the process, actually, who recognised the continued efforts of the council to support the school community. But obviously they've still got a financial challenge, which won't be easy. That then leaves our estimated gap for general fund services of £2.8 million at the moment. All of that was considered by the Cross-Cutting and Resources and Business Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And I left the comment, I left the paragraph there that we could update verbally, but basically there were no recommendations arising out of that scrutiny committee. They were broadly happy with the position that was reported to them, so we have no recommendations to consider coming out of that. The Corporate Efficiency Programme has been referred to as Apollo during the process. What we did this year, probably for the first time in any great seriousness, is we acted upon the MTFP and started really trying to work up savings well in advance of the first draft estimates coming together. And the outcome of that so far is there given in 6.1 in terms of the efficiencies already built into these estimates. There's some functional redesign, there's some income, there's some building rationalisation, but we also fundamentally challenged the pressures, and we also looked at the 22-23 outturn for any recurring savings coming forward and worked with all strategic directors to bring those in. So that's a good position. And then in 6.2, we outline the further things that we are working on off the back of that programme. Bring out the risks in Section 7. Obviously, we have the autumn statement tomorrow. We'll see what that brings. And then, of course, it's on to the Welsh Government budget on the 20th of December. We've built this budget on the assumed forward increase of 3%. Obviously, specific grants, the level remains a risk, and pay, and the rest of the risks are there. In terms of the next steps, we'll continue working these estimates and revising these estimates to try and get them into a balanced position. And then there's a range of things that will come before members, and those are outlined in 8.2. In terms of some final concluding comments, I think at this point in the budget process we are in a reasonably good position. We've obviously still got a gap to address. It won't be easy, but I'm sure we'll come up with proposals. We await the Welsh Government announcement. And as I've said on many, many occasions, we're in this position because we genuinely do take a real corporate approach in Torfaen, where all the strategic directors work together and work with me to try and bring forward proposals that are doable and manageable. And that's been a real strength and continues to be a strength. And other than that, Leader, nothing further to add.
Thanks, Nigel. Before asking out for questions, I just wanted to say a few things myself. I welcome that approach that you mentioned and the stable in-year position that I think it's brought about. That's not a coincidence. I think it's due to the financial discipline and the approach we've taken of making sensible presumptions early in the budget process and in last year's budget process as well. I think that gives us the best chance of dealing with the pressures facing all councils this year. And at the moment, people will have read about the situation in many other councils across the UK, especially over the border in England, where a number of councils are facing a lack of financial viability going forward. And I think that's a real challenge that sets the scene at the moment. In Wales, we estimate the gap across Wales being around £821 million this year. That's 3 times more than usual. That's largely due to inflation and rising costs in areas like children's placements and schools, and rising demand, of course, on our services too. That comes after 14 years of austerity, with the fabric of public services at risk across the whole of the UK. The situation really is becoming increasingly untenable in the longer term. With trade unions, we're working closely. They estimate that between 12 and 14,000 jobs could go from local governments, and that's sort of the context that which we're set, and that shows how that the situation in Torfaen is not easy by any stretch of the imagination. It's very challenging, but it's not in isolation, and indeed we're in a lot better position than many other councils are facing this year. I worry about many things while setting the budgets. I think one of the reasons we're in a reasonable place is because we've invested in early intervention and prevention services across previous years. We've looked to manage demand across areas, and I think we're seeing some of the dividends of that. I think if you look across the border at areas that have been cut, from libraries to youth services to play services to social care, there are long-term consequences of those, both on populations and on demand in acute services. You cut back youth and play services, for example, and then you end up spending more money dealing with the consequences of that. You cut back funding from social care, and there's more demand on the NHS, which is already struggling to cope with the demand it's got now. So I really think that's something that we tried to continue as we put together the budget this year. We do have the advantage in Wales of working very closely with Welsh Government. I think we've got a strong relationship. We've got a very honest and open relationship. But that doesn't mean that there aren't undeniable challenges. And the Welsh Government obviously have a finite amount of money, and they've got big challenges in terms of the NHS, transport, as well as local government, and how we try and work and how we lobby so that local government gets as much of any consequentials coming as possible, and as much of the budget as possible is important. I make the point very strongly every time I speak to Welsh Government ministers that we need to invest in the social care sector, not just the NHS. And you've seen in the last 2 years, to be fair to Welsh Government, that they've actually followed through on that with the settlements they've given to local government. So that's a lobbying effort that I will continue on a national basis. So in the light of that situation, I think a budget that balances, because of course that's important, otherwise it stores up problems for future years, keeps council tax as low as possible for residents, and delivers on those priorities is a particular challenge. Talked before about trying to avoid false economies. Talked before about the importance of investing in schools, and I'm glad that we're following through on that and avoiding the situation that may be seen elsewhere with school redundancies. One that reinforces our commitment to the most vulnerable, I think, is important, and also a budget that deals with the long-term challenges facing us, for example, decarbonisation. A budget that doesn't dig our head in the sand and avoid the difficult choices that we've got. It's very easy for any councillor to stand up in this chamber and call for us to spend more money on everything and raise less money. That's a complete false choice that we need to make sure that we reject. And just lastly, I wanted to say a few words about the autumn statement tomorrow, because I await the Chancellor's statement with great interest, given the huge funding crisis there are in public services. I was aghast at the weekend to read that the UK government were considering a cut in inheritance tax, which would be a cut in tax for the most wealthy, the 1% in our society, at the same time as we're talking about a funding crisis in our public services and a cost of living crisis. I think that would be the wrong priority. I think what's needed is investment in services going forwards. So I welcome the approach that's outlined here. I welcome the scrutiny committee's participation in that last week, and also thank all the staff and Sue and her team, for Nigel and his team for their work on this. Have we got any questions on the budget at this stage? Obviously, this is something that comes back to both Cabinet and Council as the budget takes shape. As Nigel said, the Welsh Government budget is just before Christmas, in December. So once we've got hold of that, we'll be continuing to work to make sure that we reach a balanced position that can be put to Council. The recommendations then are at paragraph 11.1. It's recommended that Cabinet notes the current financial forecast, notes the current 24-25 estimate position, the proposed next steps, and that it notes the timetable of the remainder of the 24-25 budget cycle, which has been going for, it seems like, since February now, and will continue going until next February when we set the budget. I think the longer the budget process lasts, the more we're able to make sensible, calm, long-term decisions, and I think that's a strength going forward. So I move those recommendations. Everyone happy to agree? That's agreed unanimously. Thank you, colleagues. That brings us then to item 8, which is the Canal Strategy and Action Plan. And if I hand over initially to Jo on this.
Thank you, Ida. So today we're asked to approve the Torfaen Canal Strategy and Action Plan prepared for the period 2024 to 2034. So early in 21, it was clear both elected members and our communities were keen to resolve the issues with maintenance and to realise the potential of the Mon and Brett Canal. A report to Cleaner Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee led to a recommendation to appoint a canal coordinator who would develop a strategy and action plan demonstrating a clear vision for the future of the canal in Torfaen. In October 21, we appointed our canal coordinator, and I will say we couldn't have got a better fit. Their patience and passion hasn't just developed the strategy and action plan before us today, but has also strengthened relationships with our partners and with our valued canal community groups. We are privileged to have the Monmouthshire and Brecon Canal pass through our county. The same canal that saw the industrial growth that created our valleys is now a treasured and popular attraction for outdoor activity, where our communities can enjoy a walk or a cycle on the towpath, or maybe a paddleboard and a boat on the navigable sections. Whatever activity we do, it is hard to ignore the natural beauty of the canal's significant wildlife corridor. The early The early public consultation received an incredible response, demonstrating just how loved and valued our canal is by our communities. The consultation demonstrated a need to improve maintenance and access, a desire to better interpret and protect the natural and historic significance of the canal, and many respondents would like to see the canal restored to full navigation. The strategy has been carefully developed, taking into account the consultation responses, and has a phased approach of building the foundations to attract more visitors initially, before moving towards restoration towards Mount Pleasant, and then moving towards water navigation reaching Cwmbran Town Centre. Of course, a canal that was built over 200 years ago is reliant on a continuous water supply abstracted from the River Usk. The impact of the recent introduction of the need for licences to abstract water is currently unknown, hence the later stages of delivery of the strategy is dependent on a resolution. I'll hand over to Rebecca Hartley, Team Leader, Strategic Place Projects, to talk through the detail of the vision, the phasing and the key issues. Thank you.
Thank you. As Councillor Gordon has highlighted, the Monmouthshire and Brecon Canal is a popular and much valued community asset. As section 3 of the report sets out, the canal in Torfaen is unique in that it has two different owners, with Glandwr Cymru Canal Rivers Trust owning the northern section and the council owning the southern section. The strategy and action plan presented here today relates to the areas of canal owned by the council, which includes both navigable and remainder sections. As a man-made water feature, the canal faces a number of challenges. It needs to be managed and maintained for a variety of different purposes. The canal also offers many opportunities, not least the ability to link the urban centres and visitor destinations along its route from Brecon to Cwmbran Town Centre. To harness the opportunities and to effectively consider the challenges, the strategy seeks to provide a framework for action that will support better collaboration, partnership working and coordination of activities to deliver the canal's full potential. As section 4 of the report sets out, the strategy has been prepared in consultation with a broad range of interested groups, organisations and individuals, and reflects over 1,200 survey responses received as part of a canal public engagement survey carried out in autumn 2022. The strategy will cover a 10-year period and by 2034 seeks to deliver a vision that aims to create a vibrant canal corridor for recreation, leisure, heritage and well-being, whilst also providing investment, employment, training and participation opportunities to the local communities along its length. Furthermore, the canal will support the local economy and be a major contributor to quality of life in the area. The vision also seeks to deliver a well-maintained and thriving navigable waterway connecting Cwmbran Town Centre to the wider Northern Canal network. To achieve the vision, it has been necessary to split delivery into 3 phases. The first phase seeks to develop the navigable canal to increase use and attract more visitors southwards to Five Locks Basin as a key canal destination at the existing southern terminus to navigation. From here, phases 2 and 3 will seek to move towards unlocking restoration and navigation, enabling the creation of a connected waterway to a new canal destination in Cwmbran Town Centre. As the strategy sets out, a crucial task within phase 1 that will underpin all future restoration and navigation activity will be to establish if there is a sustainable water supply for the canal that enables restoration and navigation to Cwmbran Town Centre. The development and delivery of phases 2 and 3 are dependent on this outcome. Work to identify solutions to sustainable water supplies is ongoing, and we will continue to work with partners to seek solutions to water availability. The outcome of this work will be reviewed annually and reported through the strategy's annual reporting process. Any impacts to the delivery of the strategy's ambitions will be reported back. It is noted that there are many social, economic and environmental benefits that can be achieved on the canal without implementing full restoration and navigation works. Small-scale community-based projects will be developed which all have the potential to enhance the entire length of the canal. Delivery of the strategy and action plan will depend on agreement, collaboration and long-term commitment and resources by a range of partners. Identifying financial resources to assist delivery will be a key task. Members will see in section 5 of the report that extensive internal and external consultation has taken place to inform strategy development. A Members' Canal Task and Finish group has ensured that the strategy is focused on delivering wider benefits for residents, businesses and visitors to Torfaen, and that the strategy's objectives are aligned to those of the county plan. External consultation has taken place, with over 85% of respondents stating that they agree with the strategic vision and over 88% stating that they felt the strategy and action plan would improve their experience of the canal. If I can take members to section 7 of the report, and actions to be taken following the decision, officers will continue to identify solutions to water availability as a prerequisite to progressing through to phases 2 and 3. An annual delivery plan will be developed to guide the first year of delivery, and the governance structure will be established and implemented. Thank you.
Thank you both. So move to any questions from members on this report. Sue?
Yeah, just to commend the work that the Canal Strategy is doing, and you know, to get any consultation responses is always a challenge. So having the level that we've had is really good news, and to see the enthusiasm for the canal. I'm just interested to be sure, as a member of that Canal Strategy Group, that we're continuing to really work collaboratively with the very excellent volunteer groups that we've got along the canal. Canal Volunteer Group, 46-5 Locks, the Monbrecken Abergavenny Canal Trust, they're all really passionate about the canal, as are the community councils through which the canal flows, so or doesn't flow rather. So I'd just be interested to see how that continued coordination of all those community groups is going to be sort of built in as we go forward.
Thank you, Councillor Organ. Yes, we've got a new governance structure attached to the strategy, which seeks to fully embed community representatives, all representatives of all of those organisations within the governance structure. We've got thematic working groups that break down the objectives of the strategy, which will have open access for representatives of those groups. We will also have the Torfaen Strategic Partnership, which will feed into the broader overall Monmouthshire and Brecon Canal Partnership. So I think our governance structure will hopefully bring together all of our key partners, because the delivery of the strategy is dependent on all of their input. They've all to date played such a vital role in looking after the canal and developing projects and progressing the ambitions that we have for it. So it'll be crucial for them to remain involved through the new governance structures.
Thanks. And Peter?
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to congratulate the officers for all the hard work on this. I've watched this canal deteriorate over the last 30 years, but since we've appointed a canal officer over the last 2.5 years, there's been a marked improvement, and particularly around maintenance of sections of the canal that are not navigable. And I've seen those improvements, and residents are really pleased that there's a focus now on the canal. So well done.
Okay, if I come in now, I just really welcome this report. Really, you know, it's something that means a lot to me personally as a resident, as well as a councillor. I think the work that Alice, Rebecca and Beth have done has really moved us forward here, and really meets the principles that we're trying to work at across the council, of working with our community to improve things rather than doing things to people. As a ward member, I've seen the work of the Bridge 46-5 Locks group, and I've seen the enthusiasm and the passion that they have for the canal, and I think that's something that, you know, we can really harness and work with to move things forward. I welcome the engagement mentioned at sections 4 and 5 of the report. I think that shows the wider passion the public have for the canal, both as a resource for wildlife, a real benefit for our local environments, and a huge natural amenity for leisure, well-being and quality of life, which, as someone who lives within half a mile of the canal myself, is something I hugely appreciate. You know, growing up when my kids were younger, you know, it was a safe place to go with them, to walk, to get outdoors, to learn to ride their bikes. I tend to stay off it on my bike because I'm too fast. It's one of the few contexts that I can say I'm too fast on my bike in, and not be lying. But certainly as a walking route, it's fantastic. Still, my kids now they're teenagers, still walk to and from their friends' houses further afield than Griffithstown, using the canal towpath. I know they're safe when they're doing that. So that's a huge, I think, natural amenity for our area that we should be proud of, and that we should value. Given that, I think it's vital for the strategy that we have to be ambitious for our canal, but also to be achievable and not naive in the challenges that we face. I think that's important given the history that Peter mentioned, really, of maybe cynicism where the canal was allowed to let go a little bit, was allowed to deteriorate. Certainly in the last few years, I've seen that turn around, and it's moving forward now, and it's something that I think's appreciated. The information trail that's been created along the canal, some of the physical improvements with bins and benches that have been put in place there, the way that we've overcome the undeniable challenges of the South Sebastopol development, and are still, I think, working to overcome those challenges, has been good. So thank you for all the work there. The challenges I wanted to ask about, 4.9 mentions the water that you've mentioned. Obviously, the next stretch of the canal in the medium-term strategy, 5 locks to Pont Newydd, will require a lot of water. 5 locks, as the name suggests, requires a lot of water. I think people underestimate the amount of water that is needed to make a lock work effectively. So how we look to overcome those. And of course, the funding situation in the long term. We can't escape the report that we've just given. I know the Canal and River Trust have had funding issues nationally. How do you think we can try and overcome both the water and the funding challenge to keep moving forwards? And lastly, I'd just welcome regular discussion reports back on this as we move forwards, both at Cabinet level and I think at Council level. I think the work of the Task and Finish group has been really encouraging, and the way that we've got members to buy in, whether they're wards on the canal or not, to the canal moving forwards. How do we harness that sort of interest from members as well? Because there are a number of members who really value the canal and want to work with officers and with the public to move this forward. So I guess our 3 questions are the water challenge, the funding challenge, and keeping members informed.
Thank you, Leader. You're right, the availability of water is probably the biggest challenge facing delivery of the strategy currently. We continue to work through those issues, working with Canal and River Trust, who have tremendous amount of expertise in that regard, and colleagues in the Economy and Environment Department as well. So we're currently looking at how we can scope out what the issues are in order to be able to understand how we overcome those. They will be large challenges because you're right, if we're looking at restoration navigation, we will need more water within the canal. The strategy sets up the reasons for the water availability issues, and that they are linked to the need for abstraction licences for water that comes from the River Esk, which is there to help protect the River Esk special area conservation. So it is a large challenge, and it is going to need quite a large piece of work to understand the way forward, which is why the latter phases of the strategy, phases 2 and 3, are dependent upon those outcomes, which we will investigate in phase 1. The second point relating to funding, the external funding horizon is extremely challenging when it comes to capital funding. We've made it quite clear in the strategy that a tremendous amount of revenue and capital funding will be required to drive forward development of all 3 phases. We will work with funding partners to do our best on that front, and we will keep an eye on the external funding horizon. We have had quite a lot of work undertaken through previous projects, but all of that now needs to be revised and updated. So that is a piece of work which we will look to do in phase 1 as well, subject to being able to identify funding to bring forward those pieces of work. In terms of members and ongoing engagement, the strategy is going to be reviewed annually anyway. We will be preparing annual delivery plans. There is opportunity within the governance structure for members to be involved in that, and particularly those that have the canal running through their wards. So we are more than happy to keep members updated. In terms of general public engagement, you'll see from the governance structure that there is opportunity to hold an annual public forum, which will allow all of our communities to have the opportunity to learn, understand, challenge, I guess, the work that's ongoing in terms of strategy development. Thank you.
If I can add briefly in terms of the funding situation, there are potentially significant proposed reductions in funding that have been discussed at the UK level, and this is why it's absolutely imperative that we work with the Canal and Rivers Trust, we work with the other funding groups so that we're not putting in separate and potentially contradictory funding bids. We're looking at how we can see the canal as a whole and how the individual components that we all are responsible for managing can flow together, can link together, and can put funding bids in together. So that's conversations I know the team have picked up with partners, but there are funding challenges not only in relation to the external funding, but that day-to-day operational management is a risk that we are looking to work with the trust to see how we can manage.
Okay, great. That's certainly welcome that sort of scoping work for the water issues and recognise the challenge that is. On the capital funding, I guess what we'd like, I guess, is some long-term sort of certainty around regeneration funding that could be put to that. One of the issues, I guess, we had around the LUF funding bids, for example, was the time-limited nature and the fact that this is too big for that, really. I guess as we work forward with the action plan, are we going to work to sort of cost some of the phases and break it down a little bit so that almost, I guess, the nearer we can get to a shovel-ready plan for if there is funding comes forward, the easier then it would, I guess, to bid into any funding that does come forward for it, especially that can be broken down into, you know, the navigation as a whole is such a huge potential cost that it's almost unachievable. If you break it down into, I don't know, bite-sized chunks, but more manageable chunks, then can that be a little bit more realistic in a way of getting it? I welcome the public forum, and I think that's a great idea and a great way to keep the interest and engagement going in this. I guess my question is, are we working to sort of cost the phases of so we've almost got sort of a selection of options there, so when funding might come forward that we can almost adapt to that?
Yes, that's exactly what we've got. We've got 3 phases, obviously, to delivery, distinct phases that take us to various physical locations. We've then got 5 strategy areas within which there are proposals. In terms of, obviously, those strategy areas have community projects, you know, the kind of 2 strands to the strategy. One is the ambition to reach Cwmbran Town Centre, but there are other projects and activities that can take place, you know, whilst work is ongoing to develop the bigger project. The bigger project in terms of navigation will have to be broken down into different stages because it is too big a job to do on its own. So we will look at previous work that has been done and how that was approached. Running in tandem, though, is the issue of water supply, which we have to understand as a priority because that is likely to then inform the design of capital works that would follow in terms of realising navigation further south within the borough. So that's why we've prioritised identifying solutions to water availability, because I think that will almost inform the phases that have to follow. But yes, we will break it down into chunks based within those phases. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? I know we've talked in the past about that sort of balance between, obviously, navigability is a big priority, but also even without navigability, as Peter's mentioned before, the parts of the canal through Cwmbran are still a potential improved amenity, that even if we can't get navigability back in the short term, we can work to improve those areas as a natural resource for people and for wildlife too. Okay, sorry, I'm dominating this. If we've not got any other questions, then the recommendations are at paragraph 8, that Cabinet approve the Canal Strategy and Action Plan 24 to 34. We happy to agree that? Right, and thank you to, you know, I think Alice, Rebecca, Beth, Rachel and her team and Dave have all been mentioned as being a part of this. I think this is important that this is recognised as a corporate thing as well. It's not just one sub-service areas thing to worry about. It's something that can you know, benefit communities, something where neighbourhoods have a part to play and also yourselves, but certainly the work that you've done is really welcomed by us as members. Thank you. Okay, we can move then to agenda item 9, I believe, is next, which is the tendering of the SRS contract. If I hand over initially to Peter on this.
Thank you, Leader. The purpose of this paper is to seek approval of the SRS contract to supply end-user devices over the next 3+ years. This is a contract on behalf of 4 local authorities, which includes us, and the Gwent Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. We are the authority that coordinates this work. Due diligence has been carried out, and all our partners, that's ourselves, the 3 other local authorities, Blaenau Gwent, Newport and Monmouthshire, and the Police Commissioner's Office, they're all happy. The recommendation is to award this contract. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Matt Lewis, who is here to provide more detail and answer any detailed questions. Matt, over to you.
Thank you, Exec Member. Yes, so I'll walk you through bits of the report, the kind of important pieces, but just to reiterate, the reason it comes to this Cabinet is for the reason that's been described. Torvine provides support services to the SRS. We procure shared procurements through the SRS support service, through the Torvine support service. So we don't buy anything individually for each of the partners. We only buy everything that everyone needs together, comes through this mechanism. So that's why this particular tender comes here for decision on behalf of everybody. And the important point to note is it's come as a recommendation from 4 Chief Execs and the Chief Constable, so it's been through those processes already. At the SRS, we support over 10,000 end-user devices, lots of them across schools, corporate environments, right across the board. And this paper walks you through the kind of volumes and the costs that we're talking about. So if we look at section 3.1, for example, the table there on the page over is the volumes of devices that we bought over the last 3 years. And that's been used as an indicator for the new tender. So we're not committing to buy those numbers. What we're saying is, here's historically what we've bought, and is a fair indicator of what we will buy going forward. That's how we base the value for money on the tender that's worked its way through. And as a kind of rough number, you're talking around £4.8 million worth of spend over the last 3 years on all those devices. So that's the kind of volume, again, which is why it comes to this Cabinet, because it's over the £2 million of spend. So section 4, we've gone out on a well-known framework. We've done all the work through Ardal, so they've supported us through this tender process, so it's gone through all the correct processes that side. Section 4.3 then and 4.4, it gives you the kind of detail behind the tender process. The percentage we put onto quality, the percentage we put onto price, all the pass-fail criteria for the tender process. So section 4.4, if the tenderer didn't meet any of those requirements, they were removed straight away. We ended up with 3 bids throughout the process. Section 4.5, then we're on to the actual quality measurement of all of the devices that we tested across all the partnerships. So it's been through an extensive process of, do all these fit our needs? You know, are they the devices that the partnership wants? And you know, therefore, this is the kind of bidder we end up with in section 4.6. So it's all scored according to those pass, fail and quality criteria. So we know which vendor that we want to award to. They came out quite a way above all the others in that process. So it was, you know, there wasn't kind of any grey areas in this. Section 5, I've mentioned, has been through all the Chief Execs and the Police and Crime Commissioner, Chief Constable. We also check in with each of the finance directors, all of Nigel's equivalents, just to make sure that the funding is there going forward. You know, we're not committing anybody to anything that they haven't got funding for. And the good thing about this one, I guess, is, like I said, we're not committing to a spend. We're enabling a procurement route for that spend when we need to actually buy those devices. So then down to section 9, the recommendation we're looking for is for Cabinet to approve the award of this tender to vendor C, as they've been proven for the best value for money in this process, and we'll use the framework which has been used multiple times before. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions, colleagues? I guess it's hard in a report like this to bring out the sort of the benefits of that partnership approach, because we don't know what would have happened otherwise. But I guess there are benefits in terms of both value for money and quality in working across those 5 public service partners. How possible is it to sort of put an estimate on the sort of the figure and the benefits of that?
So what we do know is that we've achieved a price which is well below market price. So if we were to go and do these as individual tenders for 200s, 300s, 400s, we'd be hitting a much higher price. And because of that volume that we've put into this, we're able to access direct to global vendors who possibly wouldn't be bidding for this tender if it was for lower numbers. So we've got access to a different market, and we've got access to a price that we would not achieve individually for sure.
Just wondering how you took account of the increasing trends, given the ability to safely allow for the use of own devices, so the BYOD element. The trends along that, I believe, are that it's increasing in popularity among staff, and the wish to use their own devices is increasing. Has that been reflected in the numbers of devices that we're likely to need going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the key reasons that we don't want to commit to an actual spend and an actual number of devices each year, because it's clear that, you know, as we move forward, people can use their own devices, mobiles or, you know, tablets or their own laptops. And our environment, the way we've got it set up, allows for that access now. So if at any point the organisation wanted to switch to different types of devices or to people's own devices, then we can relatively simply do that. And this doesn't commit us to any spend that we might waste by people moving to their own devices going forward.
Great. So I guess it reduces the risk and increases the flexibility. So that seems like a win-win. No, and certainly take the point you make about partnership means that we get a volume, which means we have access to prices and vendors that we wouldn't necessarily on our own. So that sounds like a great sort of on-the-box reason for getting into the partnership approach that we've got with the SRS. Any other questions, colleagues? Okay, if we move to the recommendation, then it's at 9.1. It's recommended that the contract for the provision of end-user devices is awarded to provider C following the outcome of the tender process using framework RM 6068 Technology Products and Associated Services, Lot 2. Catchy name. Okay, is everyone happy to agree that recommendation? That's Karen, and thank you for your work on this, Matt. It's appreciated. Okay, thanks, colleagues. So we move on then to item 10, which is the annual complaints report, 22-23. You have a handover initially to Peter.
Thank you, Leader. The report sets out the annual complaints report, including Torvine's Public Service Ombudsman annual letter for Cabinet to note. I briefly want to set out the key headlines from what I believe to be a very positive report. Members may have noted that there was an increase in complaints from 92 in 2021-22 to 160 in 2022-23. By and large, this can be attributed to a review of how contacts are categorised as complaints. The review was completed midway through 22-23, and as such, numbers are likely to increase further into the current financial year. We have undertaken and implemented this review to help ensure, as a council, we are able to strengthen accountability and transparency for residents around the council's complaints process. The team was also notified of 110 compliments across the authority, which is good news. With regard to the numbers of complaints that are being escalated to the Ombudsman in Wales, we are pleased to note they remain both low in number and low in proportion that are upheld. The corporate complaints team will continue to work with the Ombudsman Office to discuss ongoing training opportunities for staff across the council. The team remains focused on continuous improvement, working with colleagues to ensure that complaints are handled effectively and provide valuable insights and learning, which is a really important point about complaints. We have to learn from them. This report has already been through the Governance and Audit Committee, and they were content with it. Without much further ado, I'm going to hand over now to Chris Corton, the Council Complaints Team Leader, who will go into the report in a little bit more detail, and Chris will try and answer any more detailed questions that you may have, colleagues. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Executive Member. Thank you all. I'll give you a bit more detail about the report just quickly. So as you know, we've got a central complaints and FOI team. We deal with all of the complaints and requests that are coming into the authority, so we work closely with departments to liaise with them to identify lessons and any improvements that can be taken forward. We work to two complaints processes. We have the statutory complaints process for social care, and other service complaints then are dealt with by the corporate complaints procedure. So as Councillor Jones mentioned, we reviewed how we categorise the complaints during 22-23 to ensure transparency and accountability for residents and members. and to ensure accurate recording of contacts that are coming into the authority. So this has contributed to the increase in complaints that are now being recorded. So as we said, we're up to 160 for last year, against 92 for the previous year. Still, we have also been notified of 110 compliments outside of that, so those are also recorded on our records and provided detail in the report for you. Some details to note within the report itself. So 4.3, I think we've given some details then regarding outcomes of the complaints that we've dealt with. So we had 84 upheld, 16 part upheld and 16 not upheld. And I've given more detail about a full breakdown by service area, including the lessons learned in Appendix 1. 4.12 gives some information around response rates. So we work to targets within relevant timeframes for both processes, and our target against each is 95% compliance. So despite the increase, during 22-23, we did increase our compliance up to 97.04. Where we're not able to reach that deadline, then we will liaise with complainants and keep them informed so they know what's happening and they know when to expect the response. Regarding benchmarking, 4.13, I've given some detail around that. Up until 2021, there wasn't really much benchmarking available, but from April 21, the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales started to collect quarterly reports from the local authorities. So that information is then published on their website. And Appendix 3, I've given you the full breakdown for last year, which details the figures provided by all local authorities across Wales. So we all work to the same two-stage process, both within social care and the corporate complaints. Obviously, there are differences amongst the authorities as to how that complaints function is delivered. But we are then trying all to work together and ensure that everybody that contacts an authority will receive the same level of service. Appendix 2 is the annual letter from the Ombudsman. So that gives some more information about the complaints that they have received relating to the authority. So the number that they've recorded is 16, and that equates to just 0.17 reports by 1,000 residents. And there was just one intervention. Within the letter also, you'll note that there are comments for Cabinet to consider with recommendations. So as a team, we're always looking how we can improve how we deal with complaints. We work closely with departments and officers. We have regular briefings with different service areas, heads of adult and children's services, which helps us to understand processes and services, as well as for them to understand what we need to do to ensure that the complaints are being accurately addressed. We did have some training earlier this month from the Ombudsman's Office. They offer free training to all authorities. So we'll look to continue with this, and we've also discussed a potential to extend that into possible e-learning, so that's more readily available for officers across the authority. We'll also look into arrange a training package or introduction into governance and audit with the head of complaints standards authority from the Ombudsman's Office. So we're just grateful to all who help us and contribute to ensure that the complaints are dealt with accurately, thoroughly and in a timely manner. We don't do it on our own, so it is reliant on the input and engagement of officers and teams. So we're just grateful for that support. And thank you for your time and welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Any questions, colleagues? I'd like to thank Chris for the, for the way that the corporate complaints teams worked. I think he's taken over, and it's been a seamless transition from Karen before, who also took a very corporate response. I think the point you make about learning across the council from the complaints we receive is an important one. I also think it's a compliment to the work that the team do, that if you look at the table in Appendix 2, at 0.17 complaints per 1,000 residents, we're actually the lowest in Wales. So that's complaints received by the Ombudsman in relation to Torfaen Council. And I think that's a credit to the work of the internal team for the work they do to resolve complaints and to try and get the rest of the council to learn from when things go wrong. Undeniably, in what we do, we provide complex services. Things are bound to go wrong sometimes. And the way we respond to that, I think, is very important. Certainly the intelligent way that Chris and his team deal with those, and the constructive way they deal with them too, is certainly very welcomed by us, and also the way that service areas interact with that complaints team, not defensively, but trying to learn and trying to improve for the future. I think it's a good thing. Any other questions, colleagues? The recommendations, if I zip up from Appendix 2, which I was reading furiously, are at paragraph... Sorry, I'll just scroll up on my computer. Paragraph 8.1, the recommendation is that Cabinet is invited to note the information presented in the report and agree to continue to support the Central Complaints and FOI team. Cabinet is also invited to note and provide any comments in relation to the annual letter from the Public Service Ombudsman. Is everyone happy to approve that recommendation? That's approved unanimously. Thank you, Chris. Okay, that brings us then to item 11, which is the exclusion of press and public. So we need to agree the exclusion of press and public from the meeting, as the report that follows is not for publication because of in accordance with paragraph 14 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. It contains information relating to financial or business affairs of any particular person, and the public interest in maintaining the exemptions outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. So you're happy to exclude press and public? Okay. Right. Thanks, colleagues. Can you confirm?